Forgotten Pioneer Revealed. History is not a static monolith carved in stone. It is a story, told and retold, and in the telling, some voices are amplified while others are silenced, their echoes fading into the dust of the very earth they sought to understand. We often imagine the pioneers of archaeology as rugged men in pith helmets, adventurers unearthing golden treasures for kings and museums. But this is only one version of the story. Today, we unearth a different kind of treasure, the story of a mind so brilliant, a spirit so tenacious, that her discoveries reshaped our understanding of the ancient world. And yet, the world she revealed chose to forget her name. Her name was Dr. Ilara Vance, and her story begins not with a quest for gold, but with a revolutionary idea. In the early 20th century, archaeology was often little more than sophisticated grave robbing. Great men raced to find the most spectacular artifacts, tearing through layers of history with little regard for the context, for the subtle stories told by soil, stone, and shard. Ilara Vance saw things differently. While her comparators saw dirt, she saw data. While they hunted for the tombs of kings, she hunted for the lives of common people. She believed that the true history of humanity wasn't written in the grand pronouncements of emperors, but in the humble clay of a broken pot, in the composition of the soil, in the very placement of a fallen wall. She was a pioneer of what we now call contextual archaeology and stratigraphy, the meticulous science of reading the layers of the earth like pages in a book. To her, a dig site was not a mine, it was a library, and every layer was a chapter. This philosophy set her apart, and it also set her on a collision course with the established order. Her focus was a sun-baked, wind-swept region of central Anatolia, a place picked over by treasure hunters for decades. They had found Hittite relics, Roman coins, and Byzantine pottery. They believed the story of the land was told. But Ilara, poring over obscure geological surveys and local folklore, suspected they had all missed something. She believed they had only read the most recent chapters, and that a far older, foundational story lay buried beneath. She secured meager funding through a small university grant, enough for a handful of local workers and a few precious months under the relentless sun. Her male colleagues at the university saw it as a fool's errand, a charming if fruitless academic diversion. They couldn't have been more wrong. From the very first day, her methods were radically different. Instead of digging wide, destructive trenches, she laid out a precise grid system. She wasn't just excavating, she was dissecting time itself. For weeks, the work was grueling and, to an outside observer, unrewarding. They found the familiar fragments of known empires. But Ilara was patient. She was looking for a disruption, a change in the narrative of the soil. And then she found it. 4 meters below the Hittite layer, the soil changed color. It became darker, richer, and the pottery fragments within it were unlike anything ever seen in the region. They were thin-walled, almost delicate, and decorated not with the geometric patterns of the Hittites, but with elegant, swirling spirals and clusters of dots. It was a new culture, a new civilization entirely. She named them the Silurians, after a local river that snaked through the valley. As her team dug deeper, the true scale of her discovery became breathtakingly clear. She unearthed the foundations of a settlement, revealing a society with a startling grasp of astronomy. Those spiral patterns on the pottery? They weren't just decoration. Maps of constellations as they would have appeared 5,000 years ago. This civilization was older, far older than anyone had ever imagined. But the most significant find was yet to come. In what appeared to be a workshop, she found crucibles with metallic residue and several small, unassuming bronze artifacts. Standard analysis would have been interesting enough, but Ilara insisted on a full compositional breakdown. The results, when they came back from the lab in London, were earth-shattering. The Silurian bronze was not a simple copper-tin alloy. It contained trace amounts of arsenic and antimony, creating a metal that was lighter, stronger, and held a sharper edge than anything from that period. It was a unique metallurgical fingerprint, a form of bronze technology that wasn't supposed to exist for another 1,000 years. She had single-handedly pushed back the timeline of the Bronze Age in Anatolia. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a new book. Her initial paper, published in a modest archaeological journal, was a masterpiece of scientific rigor and understated brilliance. It caused a ripple of excitement and deep-seated skepticism. A discovery of this magnitude, made by a woman using unconventional methods, was almost too much for the academic establishment to accept. But the evidence was undeniable. Dr. Ilara Vance had unearthed an ancient world, and for a brief, shining moment, her name was on the lips of every historian and archaeologist in Europe. The promise of her future seemed as vast and bright as the Anatolian sky. She had no idea that the storm clouds of obscurity were already gathering on the horizon.
Block 2. Discovery stolen. Name erased. A groundbreaking discovery is never the end of a story. It is the explosive beginning of a conversation. It invites debate, inspires new research, and demands a place in the grand narrative of human knowledge. Dr. Ilara Vance had provided the world with a stunning new topic of conversation, the Silurians. But in the deeply hierarchical, male-dominated academic world of the 1920s, not everyone was allowed an equal voice at the table. Some were invited to speak, while others were expected to simply serve the refreshments. Ilara was about to learn that her contribution was seen as just that, a discovery to be served up for others to consume, analyze, and ultimately claim as their own. The catalyst for this erasure was not a villain in the theatrical sense, but a far more insidious figure: the charming, well-connected, and deeply respected Professor Alastair Finch. Finch was a titan in the field, a man whose name adorned the spines of definitive textbooks and whose lectures filled the grandest halls of the Royal Geographical Society. When Ilara's paper was published, he was one of the first to recognize its importance. He wrote to her, his letter dripping with praise for her remarkable intuition and diligent fieldwork. He proposed a collaboration. He had the resources, the platform, and the influence to bring her discovery the global attention it deserved. To Ilara, isolated and struggling for continued funding, it felt like a lifeline. It felt like validation. Finch suggested they co-author a more comprehensive paper for the most prestigious journal in the field, a publication that would cement the Silurians and their discoverer in history. It was a masterful deception, cloaked in the language of mentorship and academic goodwill. The first sign of trouble was the draft of the paper Finch sent her. His name was listed first, a clear, unspoken claim of senior authorship. The introduction subtly reframed her work. Her meticulous, evidence-based conclusions were now presented as raw data that supported his grand sweeping narrative. When she raised objections, he was soothing, paternalistic. He explained that this was simply how the game was played, that his established name would lend her findings the necessary credibility. To argue, he implied, would be unseemly, even ungrateful. Reluctantly, feeling cornered, she agreed. The paper was a sensation, but the story the world heard was not about Ilara Vance's genius, but Alastair Finch's brilliant theoretical confirmation. This was only the beginning. Finch, a charismatic and commanding speaker, embarked on a whirlwind lecture tour across Europe and America. He spoke of the Finch-Vance expedition, a title that was itself a fiction. On stage, he would project images of Ilara's own field notes, her beautiful, precise drawings of Silurian pottery and settlement layouts. But he would narrate them in the first person. As I dug deeper into the trench, he would say, I began to notice a subtle change in the stratigraphy. He spoke of my theory about the celestial maps, of my surprise at the metallurgical analysis. Ilara Vance, the actual mind behind every single one of these insights, was relegated to a passing mention, an invaluable assistant on site. The theft was audacious, performed in plain sight under the bright lights of academic celebrity. The final, brutal act of erasure came a year later with the publication of Finch's book. It became an instant classic, the definitive text on the subject for the next 50 years. In its nearly 400 pages, Dr. Ilara Vance was mentioned exactly once. In a footnote on page 12, she was referred to as a promising junior researcher whose initial survey work proved instrumental in guiding the primary expedition. It was a devastating, calculated reduction of her entire life's work into a single dismissive sentence. She was no longer a pioneer. She was a signpost that a real explorer had followed. Ilara fought back. She wrote furious, detailed letters to the university, to the Royal Society, to the publishers of Finch's book, providing copies of her original journals and lab reports as proof. The response was a wall of institutional silence and condescension. She was told she was misremembering the sequence of events. It was suggested that she was suffering from female hysteria, overwhelmed by the scale of the discovery and her minor role in it. The establishment closed ranks around Alastair Finch. He was one of them. She was an outsider. Her funding was cut. Her applications for new dig permits were mysteriously denied. Pushed to the absolute margins of the field she had redefined, Ilara Vance watched as the world celebrated the man who had stolen her legacy. Her name, once poised for greatness, slowly and systematically faded from the pages of history, buried just as surely as the civilization she had brought back into the light.
Block 3. Legacy Rediscovered. Justice. Does a tree that falls in a forest with no one around still make a sound? And does a scientific revolution sparked by a mind nobody remembers still change the world? The answer, unequivocally, is yes. Alastair Finch may have stolen Ilara Vance's name, but he could not steal the fundamental truth and power of her work. Her legacy, though unacknowledged, became a ghost in the machine of modern archaeology, its influence spreading silently and profoundly, shaping the very discipline that had cast her out. The greatest irony is that while Finch was celebrated for the discovery of the Silurians, it was Ilara's how that truly changed everything. Her revolutionary methods, which Finch had packaged and presented as his own in his famous book, were slowly adopted by a new generation of archaeologists. The meticulous grid system she employed, the painstaking process of sifting every handful of soil, the core philosophy of stratigraphy and context, these practices became the bedrock of modern archaeological fieldwork. Students who read learned Ilara's techniques without ever knowing her name. She had instigated a paradigm shift from treasure hunting to historical science, a quiet revolution that elevated the entire field. Her insistence on advanced chemical analysis of artifacts, like the metallurgical breakdown of the Silurian bronze, also set a new standard. Before her, such analysis was rare. After her work became known, it became essential. Her ghost wrote the new rules of the game, even as her name remained absent from the rulebook. For decades, that's where the story ended. A tragic injustice, sealed and buried by time. But history, like the earth itself, has a way of revealing its secrets to those who are willing to dig. The rediscovery of Dr. Elara Vance began, as it so often does, with a skeptical young PhD student in the late 1990s named Dr. Anya Sharma. While researching a dissertation on Alastair Finch, Sharma found something that didn't add up. Finch's celebrated field journals, housed in the university archives, were strangely sparse on detail. His notes were broad, theoretical, almost poetic, but they lacked the raw, granular data one would expect from a pioneering excavation. He wrote beautifully about his conclusions, but showed very little of his work. It was a red flag. Digging deeper into the archives, Sharma stumbled upon a mislabeled crate of documents, simply marked Finch Expedition, ancillary materials. Inside was a treasure trove. It was Elara Vance's complete original set of field journals, dozens of them. Page after page filled with her precise handwriting, exquisite technical drawings, detailed soil composition charts, and profound, brilliant insights jotted in the margins. It was all there. The first identification of the Silurian pottery, the dawning realization of the celestial maps, the hypothesis about the unique bronze alloy. Anya Sharma was looking at the real-time chronicle of a genius at work. The contrast with Finch's own journals was damning. He hadn't expanded on her work, he had simply copied it, often word for word. And then Sharma found the smoking gun. It was a letter from Finch to a colleague, dated just after his first visit to Elara's dig site. In it, he wrote, "The betrayal, a secret for 70 years, was finally laid bare." Dr. Sharma's subsequent paper, The Silurian Silence, reattributing the discovery of a civilization, was an academic earthquake. It meticulously laid out the evidence of Finch's plagiarism and Elara Vance's true role as the pioneering mind. The pushback was immediate, but the evidence was overwhelming. Slowly, painstakingly, the work of correcting the historical record began. Museum exhibits were updated. Textbooks were revised. A new generation was finally introduced to the brilliant Dr. Elara Vance. Her story is a painful reminder of a pattern seen throughout scientific history. From Rosalind Franklin, whose data was crucial to discovering the structure of DNA, to Lisa Meitner, who was fundamental to the discovery of nuclear fission, but was denied a Nobel Prize. It reminds us that history is a narrative, and we must always ask, who is the narrator? Elara's name was almost lost forever, but her legacy was too powerful to be contained, a testament to the fact that a true discovery, a real shift in human understanding, will eventually find its way to the light. It's our job to keep digging.